everybody. Thank you so much for coming. This is the session on global innovations, moving the needle to support teachers outside the US. We're really happy to be here. I'm moderating. I'll introduce myself and my fellow panelists. I'm Rebecca Winthrop. I direct the Center for Universal Education at the Brookings Institution. If you don't know what a think tank does, like Brookings, it's sort of like a university with no students and decision makers are your students, or if you're from the business side, it's kind of like a strategy consulting firm where you don't charge for advice and you get to pick your clients. It's a great place to work, and we work broadly on doing research to policy and practice on a range of topics around the globe. I'm going to kick off in a minute after introducing my esteemed colleagues, and we'll have a conversation. So thank you all very much for being here, bringing a little international flavor to ASU GSV. Dr. Ya is the Deputy Minister of Education of Ghana. He's actually somewhat coming back home because he's spent, 26 years?
Yes.
26 years in LA. Running charter schools, PhD from UCLA.
USC.
And USC, oh my gosh, I made a terrible mistake. And is now back home in Ghana, where he went to school and was raised, and trying to transform education in your country. Thank you for coming and spending time with us. Dr. Joo-Ho Lee is the former Minister of Education of South Korea. He's an academic, he's a professor. He's also the chair of the Education Workforce Initiative, which is a global initiative linked with the United Nations, really looking at sort of the role of teachers around the globe, working very closely with teacher organizations, I should say. And Brian, last but not least, is the head of education for the Western Cape. He has been there for 20 years and has recently, in the last 2 years, been leading the department out of South Africa and doing lots of transformations, particularly with technology. So thank you all for joining us. So what I wanted to do is just share with you a little bit about four things, four big issues that have been bothering me. I've been working in education globally for quite a bit of time, and the number one thing that has been bothering me always, but particularly of late, is how slow the pace of change is improving education. And I have been obsessed with some recent studies that have come out that show that if we keep up the normal way of doing things, by 2030, we'll have over half the young people in the world who will not have the very basic secondary level literacy, numeracy, critical thinking, problem-solving skills. That is a bad recipe for every single country, the US included, but for the world. And the bulk of those young people are in low-income countries. 9 out of 10 young people in low-income countries are not going to get those skills. 5 out of 10 in middle-income countries won't get those skills by 2030. And 3 out of 10 young people in high-income countries right here in the US aren't going to get those skills. So this is a global problem. And it's not just that they're not going to get those skills by 2030, it's that the current pace of change is so slow, it'll take possibly 100 years, depending on the country and the context, including right here in the US. Where depending on the state, it's 60 to 120 years for poor kids to catch up to rich kids on basic things like school readiness indicators. So that's the number one thing that's been bothering me. And because of that, I have done a lot of work recently in the last couple of years on this idea of leapfrogging and innovations. Can we harness innovations to rapidly accelerate progress and make non-linear progress? I've been doing a lot of writing and have a book out called Leapfrogging Inequality, Remaking Education to Help Young People Thrive. And what we did is we looked at over 3,000 education innovations from 166 countries. And when we say an education innovation, what we really mean is a practice or technology or idea that breaks with tradition in a specific context. It has to be new to a context, not necessarily new to the whole world. And we were really trying to see, can education innovations help rapidly change the pace of change? And we had to do that, we had to really think about, well, where do you want to leapfrog to? Because you could do all sorts of innovative things. It depends on where you want to go. And I don't think I have to convince anybody in this room that really what we want is all young people. We want to leapfrog and rapidly accelerate progress to a place where all young people, rich or poor, have a full, broad set of skills and competencies they really need to thrive. And so what we did is look at, set out to kind of make a pathway. What would it actually look like to be able to accelerate the pace of change? And we came up with what we call a Leapfrog Pathway. That's sort of the third thing I want to talk to you about. And ultimately, it's a switch from thinking about first focus on access, that's build schools, make them free, make them compulsory, which is what most education systems do around the world. Second, think about academic quality. Oh, are they reading? Are kids reading and writing well? And then third, once those two things have happened, which could be decades in between, is it relevant? Is what kids are learning relevant for their lives, for the world of work, life, and citizenship? To really trying to think about, trying to tackle all three of those things at the same time: access, quality, and relevance, which seems hard. A lot of people said, no, that's impossible. Don't walk before you can run. But again, what we learned, and this is my fourth point, what we learned is that actually there's a lot of incredible work out there that shows it is possible. There's a lot of innovations out there that are tackling access, quality, and relevance at the same time. And if it's not that any one single product has to do it, they could partner with other products. Kids need to have that, no matter how they're getting it. But we learned that a lot of those innovations that are doing that are small scale, they're far and few between. We looked at 1,500 Edtech innovations around the world, and only 20% of them were doing anything close to Leapfrog. 80% of them were doing fine work, useful work perhaps, but very small incremental change. And so our agenda, at least at the Center for Universal Education, is to have a conversation and really say, if we really want to get where we want to get, how can we better help the entire education ecosystems, from policymakers with great power and authority like we have on stage, to Edtech entrepreneurs, to civil society leaders, to academics, really to teachers and teacher organizations, all focused on trying to accelerate the progress of change. And so that's a bit what I'd like to have this conversation about. One of the things we're going to hone in on to give it some grounding is to talk about teaching and teachers, and how do we really think about 21st century teaching, 21st century teachers. I'm going to give two examples, and then I'm going to throw it over to my colleagues of innovations that we found had real promise for really thinking about leapfrogging. One is out of Brazil. In the Amazon jungle. It's one of the most rural places practically on the planet. They didn't have secondary education for most of the state, the Amazonas state in Brazil. It's indigenous communities. And then recently, they had a very innovative state secretary of education who, instead of doing the usual way, the normal way, sort of linear, sort of path-dependent way of expanding access by building schools and then hiring teachers and posting them around in the rural areas, he said, we don't have time for this. There are only students who had access to secondary school were in the capital. And he said, what we're going to do is we're going to build two-way video uplink, small classrooms. We're going to hire the best teachers in the entire state who are going to teach to 1,000 little classrooms, and have mentoring teachers with the kids to do all the social and emotional and classroom management. So he split the teaching workforce, which is heavily unionized, and he spent a lot of time getting them on board, and they're very supportive, into two: lecturing teachers, mentoring teachers. What happens? In a couple years, those kids all have access to secondary education and perform on average with every other kid in Brazil, which is an amazing accomplishment. To me, that's a great sort of leapfrog example. There's lots of other much smaller scale examples like that of harnessing technology, including adaptive learning software for literacy in India, an application called MindSpark. And so I think what we want to have a conversation about today is really, how can we think about education progress differently, particularly in the developing world, and perhaps that is also an area where we might have more openness to leapfrogging. So, Dr. Yao, what about starting with you? You're in Ghana. You have a president that has a massive political agenda on education. So very few countries get that. Education is the #1 election issue for the president of Ghana. What are you doing about sort of leapfrogging?
Thank you, Rebecca, for a wonderful opportunity, first of all, to be invited to the conference, and also to have the opportunity to share with you what we're doing in Ghana. But before Ghana, I lived here next your neighbor county of Los Angeles, where I spent about 10 years teaching mathematics in the LA Unified School District, and then moved on to, with community support, develop some charter schools in Los Angeles. And actually, the current president, when he was running, they did a reception for him in the auditorium of one of my schools, and he just asked me, would you consider coming back to Ghana to help me change the education system? And I said I would consider that. But it wasn't easy leaving school systems that I had developed with over 200 workers and saying hello to the students and goodbye, I'm leaving for Ghana. It was not easy, but I decided to go anyway and ended up running for parliament. So I'm a member of parliament and at the same time Deputy Minister for Education, and with a president who is just fixated on how education can be used to transform his nation. And I happen to serve on the platform committee that wrote the idea of bringing free senior high school to Ghana. After 60 years of independence, high school was not free, which meant that the poor was not going to high school. Deprived students were not going to high school. You didn't have the money, you didn't go. So you have a gross tertiary secondary enrollment ratio of about 46%. The rest of those students who couldn't go find themselves on the streets, and they don't qualify to work in the first place because they were not at the working age. So we had a situation where every year over 150,000 students graduate from junior high, don't have anything to do. And this president said he wanted to change it. So we won the election in December 2016. And 2017, most people were saying, then give yourself some time. Politicians make promises all the time, but it doesn't mean you fulfill it immediately. But he said, no, I promise and I'm going to deliver. And by the way, I'm going to deliver without any international support. So we did not go to the World Bank, who we ran to many times. We did not go to USAID or any agency. He said, I'm going to do this with my resources. And if it means I have to use all the money that is coming from oil to fund education, it's better than leaving it for somebody to come and steal. So he decided to really go ahead and do free senior high school, which is a major access issue. So for the first time, we have over 100,000 students going to senior high school. And then the question became, where are the buildings? So this is where the leapfrogging came in. In 1994, that's was the first time I got a job as a teacher in LA Unified School District. And that was the year when most schools in the state of California were doing 4 years of high school. Hitherto, it had been 3 years. So in 1994, I was hired to teach mathematics at Manual's High School.
Here in the U.S.
In the U.S., and the school was year-round, which means we have students throughout the whole year. And principals are only about 3 weeks of vacation, and they had to come back because every time there were students there. So when we were entering into our second year of free senior high school in Ghana, and the facility issue arose, and we had no idea where to put the students, I walked to my minister and said, I have a way. We did something in California, we can use that here. And then my minister said, okay, put the concept paper together. I put it together for him, and then he said, let's go and see the president. So we went to the president, I described it to him, and he said, this is a perfect idea. We have no choice. We have to do year-round school in Ghana. And that began a process where are how to educate Ghanaians on year-round schools. Very new idea. People were calling. Almost every single radio station and TV station had to be on because I was the only one who understood it. So we were able to do that, enrolled over 150,000 more students into our high schools in Ghana. So now we have in Ghana what they call double track, where Form 1 students are split into two. We divide the school into two paths, two pathways, and students are there throughout the year. So the access problem has been solved. Then we had to look at quality. And the quality issue was, how do you bring in more students and make sure that you do not destroy the quality of education? Parents were concerned. So for the first time, we came up with an intervention grant that is supposed to support schools to provide further intervention and really assess students as they come in and look for ways to personalize instruction for them so that we'll be able to improve the quality. And then the next thing was, what about schools that don't have science teachers and quality math teachers? How do you deal with them? And then we came up with an innovative thing that was already being done, but we upscaled it. It was called the iBox. We recruited top performing teachers across the country and videotaped them in various subjects in math and science and put it in a device called the iBox, which is an offline device that enables Wi-Fi to be transmitted about 1 mile radius and for students to be able to go in and do all the right stuff in terms of mathematics and science. So that's something that we're doing to improve quality. Now we're looking at relevance, and we're embarking on a major overhaul of our curriculum. And we're going to spend over $100 million retraining teachers so that they can teach differently and improve critical thinking so that we can then move on to the next step of boosting our gross tertiary enrollment ratio. Now, Ghana is somehow caught up in what I call complacency or mediocrity trap, because when you talk about Ghana and West Africa, we are the high performers. So it's easy for you to be complacent because when you talk about education in Africa, you say, hey, Ghana is doing very well. So that does not create a sense of urgency. People are looking at themselves and say, we're doing well. But my question to them is that you are doing better than who? You are not doing better than California. You are just doing better than Guinea. And therefore, we need to wake up from that sense of complacency. And that is where we are now. When I go on radio interviews, what I tell them is that we are not doing better than South Korea, so we cannot say that. And unfortunately, that has always been an example. So I tell them, so far as we are not close to South Korea, we are not better than any. Don't worry about Africa trap.
I think we'll come back to that because that's a perfect segue. And we should all, in addition to the iBox, which is a really interesting sort of offline way to deliver great high quality content to students, you're also doing some interesting work that I understand was started by the Varkey Foundation. Where you're beaming in teachers to areas that have no teachers. Yeah. So again, another useful way of harnessing technology. Brian, maybe we'll zoom to another part of Africa and go to South Africa. You can just tell us a little bit about the context of Western Cape, and then you've been at the forefront, almost 20 years, you've been a leader really sort of moving the state to embrace technology in various fronts. So tell us a little bit about that.
Thank you. We're further away than Ghana from here, way, way south. First of all, when we speak about the Western Cape, we have to note that it's not typical South Africa, and I'll explain that in a minute. Our Western Cape province, which is like one of your states, has got 1.2 million learners, 34,000 teachers, 1,500 schools. We have great diversity that is still a legacy of apartheid. That's a legacy that has diversity in performance, diversity in poverty levels, diversity in quality of education, teacher training. All of those aspects are still very prevalent. Now, I say it's different to the rest of the country because we have a different outlook. We've got a different view, a different opinion. We think about things differently. I'm an educator, not a politician. And so we want education solutions that are sustainable and that last. And we have latched on for many years upon how we improve the quality of learners for the poor, because the perception is sometimes there, even from teachers and principals, that because you're poor, you must be stupid. And we rebel against that entirely. And so over a number of years, we've had a few interventions where we've actually brought up the performance of the poorer communities and learners closer to and start to approximate the better performance. Now, the diversity in our province and in our country is such that we have of the best schools in the world in the Western Cape, but we also have of the worst schools in the world. And that diversity we have to eliminate and get closer together. So the bit of experience that I've had has been not so much in moving pockets, but in trying to move an entire system. We've done that with the literacy and numeracy strategy from about 2004 to 2012. The McKinsey 2010 report refers to that, and our province is one of the systems. But we're now using two significant strategic interventions that are intended to transform the entire education system. For about 5 years now, we've been busy with if you like, an Edtech intervention. We call it an e-learning strategy, where we've achieved amazing, certainly technical impact, if not yet full learning impact. We have all of our schools are connected to a broadband strategy, except a small group of very deep rural schools. We have in more than a third of our schools Wi-Fi blankets over them. We have model schools where we have one-to-one device strategies. We have digital classrooms, 7,500 or more than a third of our classrooms. So our intent is using technology to transform teaching and learning. And where teachers are sometimes loath to follow it, we circumvent that by inviting learners to participate. And so there's also a pull factor from learners pulling that. So the Edtech part of that system is significant. But there's one part that we are doing over the next 5 years, which is even more significant in our view. And that is, despite the millions we've put in over the last 10 years, more than between 100 and 200 million rand a year on teacher development, we have reached what I call is a glass ceiling. We're not transcending performance, which is still a diverse performance. We're not getting past 90% in the K-12 or in the 12 level, etc. We've decided that part of that is because we're a nation that's traumatized. Our teachers are traumatized because of apartheid. They still live that legacy. Our learners are traumatized because of gangsterism, drugs, joblessness, violence. The go-to for any argument is grab a knife and stab a guy or shoot one. It's a reality, and you say, well, that doesn't typify the nation. It doesn't. It doesn't typify everyone, but in large pockets of learners, that's the go-to. We have to get rid of that. And so values in our system has gone to pot. Learners have not got hope. There's not a growth mindset. And our teachers think kids are stupid because they don't seem to be able to learn. So we've introduced a strategy called a Transform to Perform strategy that dovetails with the Edtech strategy. That strategy has got 4 parts to it. One is it's got an underpinning importance of developing leadership at all levels of our education system, including middle management, district management, and the leadership in schools, which in fact is your largest sector or group of leaders leading education. And they then rest on 3 pillars. The central pillar is developing values in education, something that has gone to pot in our society. And that's quite a significant program. The second one is creating a growth mindset for learners. And that's incidentally a California-developed, University of California, Davis-developed program that we've piloted in schools. And we've got data for that. In 20 schools where it's piloted, 3 45-minute sessions in the course of a year, the maths performance of grade 8s in the trial group have gone up by 4.6 percentage points. That's not insignificant at all. And that's one way of dragging up performance quite quickly. And the third leg of that is getting teachers' mindsets right. Teachers are our most valuable resource. We spend 80% of our 23 billion budget on teacher salaries. We have to get teachers to, again, believe in kids. I know the developing countries don't understand this, these developed countries, because developed countries have a teaching core where you think everyone is on par, knows exactly what they've got to do, or professionally inclined. That's not necessarily true in a diverse society, such as in South Africa. Even though we have varied qualities of teacher competence, knowledge, and pedagogy, more importantly, we have to get our teachers to understand and again believe in the children, believe in their future. We visited a school this morning where that is absolutely typified. The positivity, the climate, the culture of the school. We have to get that in our context in the entire systemic nature. It's got to be systemic.
And you were talking about how, just to pick up on that, a piece of what you're doing that you thought was most important right before the session was not only for kids to get a growth mindset, but and for teachers to raise their expectations of children, but teachers themselves have to have a growth mindset for themselves.
Absolutely. You know, when I walk into a staff room, as I often do, I don't stand with the principal, I go sit with the teachers. Whether they're having a cup of coffee or munching a sandwich, and I say, how's your day? How's it going? And almost in all schools, they say, no, it's okay, you know, but the kids are so naughty, but the discipline is, but there's always a but to it. They always revert to the negative. And we have to change that because you know that, I always say this, I've never seen a despondent teacher that can inspire a child. We have to get our teachers to be inspirational, and for that they need a positive mindset. They have to believe in kids again. It'll uplift their work, it'll put in energy and effort, and it'll work through to the kids as well.
Great. Thanks, Brian. We can come back to that also. All right, Juho, on to you. One of the things, you've done many things, and as Minister of Education for South Korea, one of the bravest things you've did is transform admissions to universities, hoping it will infiltrate the whole rest of the system. That's a great side conversation if you want to pick up. He's learned lots of lessons we could learn here also in the US, but at the moment, you're really trying to pursue globally and partnering with Education International, which is the global federation of teacher unions and organizations around the world, rethinking what is a teacher's role and what is a teacher's job. And can you tell us a little bit about this idea of high tech, high touch?
Yeah. Thank you, Rebecca. So first talk about South Korea. You know that South Korea is the best example probably of leapfrogging. Right? So South Korea was really poor 70 years ago, but now it per capita GDP reached to more than $30,000. Now became advanced countries with full-blown democracy, mainly thanks to its investment in people. Mainly thanks to the power of education. But we have increasingly felt the limitation of current learning system. You know that Korean teachers are the best of the best. If we ask students what they will become, number one priority is teacher, not lawyer, not doctor. The best of the students want to become teachers, and they really become teachers. But they are increasingly losing their self-efficacy because students are less and less engaged in the classroom. They just deliver what others have already designed for them. So the teachers are not really able to respond to individual needs of students in this current system. So you know that maybe Korea reached to the top level of the current learning system. Maybe so that why we really feel the great need to change, because and as Korea become a donor country after 2010, I talked to my colleagues in the government that we should not let other countries to follow Korean model. Right? We really have to work together to explore a new path, because we all know that current system is not working. They fail many students and they fail many teachers. So then what could be the new model, right? So according to your research, there have been already some good examples of innovations, but I still think we haven't found scalable and sustainable solutions yet. There are some, but it's not really scaled yet, right? So globally, I think we really have to work together to explore new paths, finding out new solutions. And the key, I think, is the teachers. So when digital transformation occurs in many industries, digital transformation requires redefinition of the industry itself. So in education, you really want to harness technologies to leapfrog, you will have to define education itself, right? And particularly the education workforce itself. So what the teachers are doing, what they are aiming at, how they are interacting with students, all should be changed. But these changes are not really happening yet in any other countries, including Korea. So maybe this is time for us to globally act together to find out new solutions. So there are many edutech innovations out there, but even in Korea we have a lot of edutech innovations. But these innovations should be combined combined with transformation of teachers. Not just asking teachers to adopt new technologies, but really have to consider how we can make a big transformation in teaching job itself. Right? So that's how we work together in Education Workforce Initiative. And one example is the one that we started for Vietnam. We had a kickoff meeting a few weeks ago. We call a high-touch, high-tech learning project. The reason why we call high-touch, high-tech is that, as you pointed out, as a minister, I really try hard to introduce high-touch learning in education system, because
And what do you mean by high-touch?
Yeah. It's more human touch, human connection and mentoring, and also more focus on high-order thinking skills. You know that most traditional learning model focus on knowledge contents. So ask teachers deliver the contents. So ask students memorize contents. But this is not useful at all, because you know that now we are all connected, students are all connected digitally, and why we ask them to memorize things, right? So teachers should focus more on high order thinking skill and also more broader skills, including communication and collaboration skills and so forth. So then how you make these changes happen, right? So that's why I help radically change admission procedures in university admissions, and also we radically change our curriculums. But these changes are just for the changes of teachers. But if teachers do not respond to these changes, all those changes do not really benefit students. There are a lot of side effects, frankly speaking. So that's why I focus on high-touch, high-tech learning. So if you really want to make teachers move to a high-touch learning, you have to embrace technologies so that education technologies can do what teachers used to do. So, for example, the artificial intelligence adaptive learning system can help students to master knowledge contents according to individual students' pace and ability. So I saw a really big potential of artificial intelligence adaptive learning system. So that's how we introduce high-touch, high-tech learning project in Vietnam. We ask a global edtech company for AI adaptive learning system in this project, and also we ask Arizona State University to provide training for teachers for Vietnam schools, and we ask 4 schools in Vietnam to join in this project. So we designed the whole the new project focusing on math 7th grade students, and we had a kickoff meeting. Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing what happens.
Yeah.
I wonder, you said something about, even in Korea, there's lots and lots of EdTech products, there's lots of solutions, but one of the barriers is how do you get teachers to really embrace and understand? I'm going to ask Brian and Dr. Ya, what are sort of the barriers that you face in making EdTech really effective and being absorbed from a government perspective? Do you want to start? Like, what are the things that are stopping you?
We've had quite a bit of success. I'm quite humbled by the way that the teaching corps is responding to our request to participate. They stream to in-service training lessons that are not that are voluntary, they're not compulsory. Weekend after weekend, school holidays, etc. And a lot of that has got to do with the fact that the message has gone out for a number of years about the importance of the change, the systemic transformation, the fact that we have to prepare kids for the 21st century, we're not doing it. But most importantly, to sell it to teachers, you have to explain to them that it is to their benefit. Makes them better teachers, they've got better products, it reduces their admin, and therefore they've got time saving. And so we're not finding that it's only the young yuppies that kind of sign up for this. We're finding a whole host of middle-aged and elderly teachers really embracing it. It's got to do with the message. It's got to do with the way you package it, and teachers have to see that there's benefit in it for them, in my view.
Right. Okay, your turn. What do you think?
I think he couldn't have said it better. Teaching is a difficult job. And anything that you are implementing, to the extent that it's going to make their life easier, they embrace it. And in Ghana, they embrace it. Teachers pay. Some teachers are paying for their own professional development in IT. And some are investing in themselves.
And how do you bring them into that dialogue? How did you get to the point where they're embracing it? Brian talked a lot about that he's done massive campaigns across the country about why this is important and how it's going to help. What has been your strategy in Ghana?
I think the interesting thing, teachers are embracing technology in a very interesting way. If you look at what the Vaki Foundation was doing, training teachers and beaming instruction to various classrooms, we didn't have to do much than to show them the benefit that your life is going to be easier. Students are finding different ways to learn from you. And so teachers have never been against technological tools that we introduce into the system, to the extent that you're giving them the opportunity to enhance what they do, they embrace it. Because many years ago, lesson plan had to be handwritten. And teachers are resisting it. Why do I have to handwrite lesson plans for you when I can just type it and do my PowerPoint presentation? So on the other hand, in fact, it's more like the education establishment that's against the technology and not the teachers. The teachers are fully embracing it. And we are finding ways to make it easy for the establishment to really remove the barriers. For example, we have boarding schools, and most headmasters will say that I don't want to see cell phones in boarding school. Interestingly, they don't have enough computers, and you have an iBox sitting there with quality content. And because they don't have enough computers, they are not getting access to the content in the iBox. And if they could use their cell phone, then the access is readily available to them. So one head mistress came up with the idea that, yes, we're going to do it. And they just removed the SIMs of the students and they inserted new ones so that they cannot access any content of any site. And as a result, they are the highest users of the iBox. Because she was innovative and said to herself that, if I cannot get laptop for the students and they are bringing cell phones, I should embrace it. And this is what we are getting the Ghana Education Service to understand, that they have to allow the headmasters to innovate and not be afraid of something as simple as a cell phone and what students can do with it. So I think it's rather teachers who are fighting and are saying, allow us to use innovative tools to deliver instruction and improve learning in our classrooms.
Great. Well, I want to give a big round to our panelists. An applause. Thank you all very much. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoy the range of EdTech extravaganza out there and get some good ideas. And please, of course, see them after if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
It's short.
I know, really short.